Wade Sleater is the CEO of eHub, which is a software company for third-party logistics companies. If you don't know what those are, I'm sure you'll learn a little bit more about that today. It's definitely something that impacts all of us in our modern age of like Amazon fulfillment. And if you go into any sort of e-commerce business or any business where you're shipping something, you're going to have to know about these. Wade graduated from BYU. He's married, has 5 kids, and lives in the Salt Lake Valley. So please welcome Wade Sleater.
Thank you, appreciate it. I actually used to attend seminars like this at BYU. I was in the entrepreneur program. Oh, thank you. I was in the entrepreneur program in the business school. And so I used to attend these, and some of them were helpful and exciting, and other ones were super boring. So I was hoping that today would be not boring. So what I would like is, I'm a pretty informal guy. In fact, I told Russ that I'll dress up by just not wearing my hat today, and I'll do my hair. And so I would like this discussion to be a little more informal. So if you have questions along the way, honestly, those questions kind of guide discussion, and in a lot of ways make it far more interesting and in depth. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my history. I'm not sure how much I'm going to go into my particular company. The reason why is because it's super boring. And the thing I like about it being boring is because I don't have a lot of competition because it's complex and it's boring. But I'll tell you the story of how we got to where we're at and how I never thought I'd be in a tech company. I was never smart enough to understand that space, but somehow I ended up with a tech company, which I think is a good principle to learn, that as you try things, things will evolve, and you kind of have to go with the flow, and you have to chase the right opportunities, and you have to do your best to make the right choices. But before we do that, I'm going to tell you the story, but I also want some principles to be kind of threaded throughout this discussion. So I have a little object lesson that I wanted to have before we kind of get started. So I have a $100 bill. I'm willing to trade somebody this $100 bill for anything you're willing to trade for it. So I want you guys to throw out what you're willing to trade for this $100 bill. $50. 50? Okay, that's an option. What else do we got? Protein shake. Is it any good? I don't know. Okay, what else we got? Ooh, I just had one of those. That's why I've had to go to the bathroom so much. What else we got? Rockstar, protein shake, $50. Whoa, Apple Watch. Did your parents buy that for you? Okay. Anything else? Hat. Is it a flex fit? Because I don't know if it's my size. Okay, gotcha. Anything else? Did your parents buy those for you? Do you use them a lot? Well, I don't want you to not have them anymore. Anything else?
What was that, earbuds?
Yeah.
$100. My shoes.
Oh, shoes. I think I'm going to go with the Rockstar. So why don't you come up here real fast? And do I have till 12:20? Is that what I have? 1:20. Yeah. All right. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so the point I wanted to illustrate here is, what do you think this Rockstar is worth? Under $10? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Well, you can usually get like 2 for $4. Yeah.
Well, it depends on what's your definition of worth.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, now we're talking. Anybody else? Does anyone know what it was worth to me? Okay. Wrong answer, but anything else? Okay. The one thing we know for sure is that to me, this Rockstar was worth more than $100 because I was willing to exchange $100 for it. And what was your name? Jacob? Jake. To Jake, this rock star was worth less than $100. We don't know how much more than $100 is worth to me, and we don't know how much less it was worth $100 to Jake. So the only thing we know for sure is that this was not worth $100, right? To either of us. It's interesting you brought up $50 because do you ever go to the bank and say, here's $1, can I get $1 back? No, right? And so that's the same idea is if it was worth $100, why would I trade $100 for this if it's worth $100? This is how economics and business works, right? That exchange is what creates value. The value to me is different than the value to Jake, but that exchange is what creates value. Does that make sense? So one of the things we talk about in my business all the time is that dollars follow value. And sometimes, when you always throw dollars in everything, it sounds maybe a little dirty. But the more deeper way to think about it is value follows value. So in entrepreneurship, if you want somebody to pay you dollars, you better create value. They're not going to give you money before they understand what the value that you're going to create for them. So again, dollars follow value. So that's one principle we'll talk about throughout this discussion. The second one is that the only thing that created value for this object was what? Okay, so me as a human being is what was willing to create value for this. If I didn't think it was worth anything, I wouldn't pay for it. What happens in that case if people aren't willing to pay for products? Or that business specifically goes out of business, right? So again, it's critical that in an entrepreneurial sense that you have to come up with something that the marketplace will determine has value. You can't determine if it has value. You might think it has tons of value, but the only way you can validate it is if the market's willing to pay for it, right? So that's the second principle, is that people are assets, things are not. So you have been raised probably, and it's not necessarily your parents' fault, it's society, that a house is an asset, or a car is an asset, or your 401k is an asset, or all of these monetary things are assets. But the only reason they have any perceived value or intrinsic value is because why? We believe it has value. Humans. So if we didn't on certain things, it would cease to have value. If no one wanted to live in that house would cease to have value. So people are assets, things are not. Okay? There's one more principle, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So now I'll go into my history. When I was 12 years old, my mom was at a youth camp for a week, and my dad was at work, and I lived in an upper middle class community in the Pacific Northwest of Washington, and we lived in a kind of a lower middle class scenario. So all my friends had money or enough money, and they would go skiing and do all these fun things. My vacation was visiting family in Salt Lake, and we had to drive there in a van without any air conditioning and all of those fun things. And so I decided that I wasn't willing to live that way anymore, and I wanted to do all these fun things. So when she was gone at this camp, I called the local newspaper and I said, "Hey, I would like to get a paper route." And they were like, "Well, how old are you?" And I was like, 12. And they said, "Well, how about you start by coming with us and we'll sell subscriptions and we'll get to know you and we'll see if that's something that we think you're capable of." Well, I went out with this team of people selling newspaper subscriptions, and it ranged from probably 15-year-olds to 25-year-olds, and I outsold all of them when I was 12. And so I learned early on that my skill set is more on the sales side than than anything else. But they gave me this paper route, and when my mom got home, she's like, "What did you do?" And I was like, "Well, I got a paper route." Like, essentially, you know, I know that our situation is what it is, so I'm going to go do something to make sure that it's good for me. And so I started buying my skis. I bought the ski pass. I rode the bus. I started doing all these things that I enjoy doing. And then when my brother, Lauren's dad, turned 16, he was older than me, I hired him to be my driver. And I picked up 3 additional routes. And that is the beginning of my experience with my brother. And we have worked together ever since. He's not here today, but he was hoping to come down. But anyway, part of the what my experience there was, and this is the third principle, is that we have a saying in our family, our own version of, and it means lots of things, but the saying is "be a legend." And in my daughter's room, I have two of my daughters share a room, and they're 16 and 13. And there's a little framed thing that just says "be a legend." And what that means in our family is that we are just gonna make it happen. We're gonna go be uncomfortable in all the things that we do so that we can learn and grow. And at the end of our lives, we can look back and say, we were a legend. We full sent everything that we did. We were committed and we did our best. And we failed sometimes and we won sometimes. But at the end of the day, we learned. And so this is something that I look back at my own history. And in that moment when I was 12 years old, I was being a legend in my own mind. I didn't know it at the time. And even with my littler kids, as they've grown up, every time we've been at a restaurant or whatever, and the waiter or the person at the counter says, "What would you like to eat?" And they look at me and start to tell me, I'm like, "Nope, I don't want to know what you want to eat. Tell them." And it's just those little things that help them get over being uncomfortable. Being an entrepreneur is very uncomfortable. It's hard. There's lots of failures, there's lots of wins, there's lots of learning. And that's really where it comes from, is what are we doing to put ourselves in a position to learn? I actually spent my first 2 years in college at the time, it was Rick's College. It's now BYU Idaho, but I spent my first 2 years of college there. And as I was, at the time, it was only a 2-year school, so I had to kind of move on. I loved it. It was 2 of the best years of my life. And I remember driving down to BYU on a kind of a visit. And as I was driving, I was thinking to myself, you know what? This transition is uncomfortable, but that's why I have to do it, is because I got so comfortable in the situation that I was in that I had to put myself in a position outside my comfort zone. And that was necessary for my own personal growth. Those are important principles to learn if you want to be an entrepreneur. So when I was at BYU, I was recruited to sell pest control, which I'm sure happens a lot around here. Pest control, alarms, solar, whatever. I was recruited to sell pest control between my junior and senior year, and I went out and sold, and I made great money. And I was like, this is the worst job on the planet, but I made some money. But I decided that after that summer, I was never going to do that again. In fact, I was so committed to it that in my final senior year of college, I was taking all these classes, creating and managing new ventures, financing new ventures, all these things. And I wrote a whole business plan on how I was going to build a door-to-door company to do this. And I was going to hire other people, just like my brother to be my driver. I was going to hire all these other people to knock the doors for me instead of me having to do it myself. So that started a company called Atlas Marketing right out of school. Right at the end of my senior year, we ran right into it. I hired 14 guys. We went down to Phoenix, Arizona, and before then we got a contract with Dish Network, and we started selling Dish Network. Within a couple years, we were Dish Network's #1 retailer in the country, and we had 300 sales reps across the country, and we were doing our own installs. So that was another 200, installers all over the country. It was It was a crazy time, but it was a super exciting experience. I thought I was so cool and that anything I touched turned into gold, that I could just invest in these real estate opportunities. I had a couple houses that were being built in Park City that were literally going to cost like $4 million, and I was killing it. I was so cool that I drove a Ferrari, and I thought I was the coolest guy ever. I was so cool, and if you guys know the movie Gone in 60 Seconds, who knows the car Eleanor? Anyone? Okay, so there were 7 Eleanors produced for that movie, and only 2 of them survived, like crashes and all that kind of stuff. And I had one of the 2. I was so cool. On top of that, I drove a G-Wagon, when I wasn't driving the Ferrari. And then when I wasn't doing that, I had a Porsche Carrera GT. Like, I had the coolest cars ever. I was neglecting my family, and I was so focused on the business, and I had such an ego that I needed to get humbled. So 2007, 8 comes along, and in the summer of 2007, our company did 30,000 installs, Dish Network installs all over the country. We did over 30 million in revenue, which translates to probably, in reoccurring revenue, probably a couple hundred million in recurring revenue for Dish Network. And that economy hit. All the real estate started going down hard. And by January of 2008, I was in a bankruptcy meeting, putting that business into bankruptcy. And I went from my nice house with my nice cars to moving into, overnight, moving into my sister-in-law's basement. And the next morning was a Sunday morning. Clearly, it was an impactful experience. Sunday morning, I'm laying in bed and I'm wallowing in my misery. I'm crying. And my wife comes in and says, "Get up, you're going to church." And I remember that because I needed to move on. I needed to get myself together and put myself in a position of taking care of my family. So over the next 2 years, I fought off lawsuits and the IRS, and we don't have enough time to go into all those stories, but you can certainly ask me questions about that at lunch or at the end of this. And I got my law degree, not really, but I got my law degree in reality going through that process. I didn't have any money, so my lawyer would allow me to work at his office, and I would do a lot of the legal work and just ask him questions. He would review it, and then we would manage that whole process. And so I learned a tremendous amount from that experience. That failure defined who I am today, who I am with my family, who I am in business. I decided moving forward that whatever I did in my life, I would not go into debt, and I would not have any investors, because I did not want to go through that experience again. So in late 2009, this guy calls me and says, "Hey, I know your background with building sales teams. There's this opportunity that came up. I'm interested in investing in this one business. I just wanted to get your thoughts around it." And so I started going through this process. I had nothing else to do, and I didn't know if it would lead to some opportunity. And I went through this process, and in this process, I learned about the United States Postal Service having these 3 reseller contracts. 2 were with 2 companies in Utah, and the third was with a company in New York. And I don't know how, but I ended up, through this experience, figuring out who the owners of these contracts were. And I went to one of these companies and I said, "Hey, I built this sales business back in the past. I think I can do it again." They were busy with a lawsuit with DHL. That's a whole different story. And so they're like, "Yeah, go ahead, do whatever you want. Sounds good. We just want to make this contract worthwhile." So I started a company called Move Method. Move method. I was the only guy. I didn't have any money. I was unwilling to go into debt. I was unwilling to raise any money. I would just use my network and I would sell shipping services. I knew nothing about shipping, logistics, or anything else. But what I did was I decided I was going to learn, I was going to become the expert at it. So I started reading. If you want a really good weekend book, grab a UPS service guide, and it tells you all the different products that they ship, all the rules around all of it, all the pricing, from 8 zones through 150 pounds, all this super exciting stuff. And so I read those manuals and started putting spreadsheets together and comparing it to the USPS products and figuring out how I was going to position selling this product that I knew nothing about. But I was committed and I had nothing else going for me and I had to take care of my family and I was in that position of just making it happen, of doing my best to be a legend. And so about 3 months into this process, I learned, as I was with this USPS rep on an appointment, they had been with USPS for 20 plus years. I learned that when I walked out of the meeting, I was like, I know more than they do about their own product because I was willing to put in the effort. I was trying to figure out how to create value. And the value that we created was we found ways for these companies to save money on shipping, which was significantly impactful to their business. The first year, we did about $82,000 in revenue, and which was super exciting because I didn't make any money up to that point, and so I could barely pay my bills with that, but at least we saw some traction. The next year, we did about $450,000. The next year, we did $1 million, and on and on and on. We got to about $5 million in revenue. And then our 2 biggest partners, one bought the other, and because they were threatened by our business, because we owned about 10% of their customer base, through our sales efforts, they decided they weren't going to let us sell their product anymore. So I was in a position in 2015 trying to figure out how we were going to grow the business. The good news was they put us in a position, they kept paying us, so we had cash flow. And I decided that, you know what, our next move is to build a technology company so we could bypass them and not have to work with them at all. And so in 2016, we hired a CTO, someone who's far smarter than I am, and we had him start building the technology. We knew how customers interacted with the technology, so we could give them some guidance. And in 2018, we put our first customer on our platform, our own platform. And ever since then, it's gone crazy. We now have about 75 employees. We still are debt free. We still have no investors. We bootstrapped the whole thing the whole time, and we're sitting in a pretty good position today. It's been a fun ride. I tell people all the time, they're like, hey, what do you like to do for fun? And I'm like, well, business is my favorite hobby. And when I'm not doing that, I like to play golf. But I really love being in the office and working with people and solving problems and figuring out how we can create value for a customer, because I know that the dollars are not going to follow unless I can create value for that customer. So I'm in an interesting position now because we're now at a point where I literally get 2 or 3 emails a week where they are sending, there's private equity firms or venture capital firms trying to throw money at us. And we're just in this weird position because we have the cash flow to keep growing at the pace that we're comfortable with. But at the same time, I'm like engaging with them because I know that it's valuable to keep learning. Because there's plenty I don't know and I would like to know. And so this is my next phase, is learning how that world works. So that's where we're at today. Matt McCoy, is his first day on the job. I said, hey, do you want to come down and drive down to a seminar with me, and I can tell you all about the company and what I want you to do, and how I want you to contribute. And again, one of the things I learned early on is that you have to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. I have the I guess I have the gumption to make it happen, but then I'm smart enough to surround myself with people who are smarter than me that just make me look really good. And Matt's one of those people. And so we're really excited to have him. But I now have a team of people, an executive team that is awesome. They contribute in so many ways. They help the business grow. And I hope in the next, couple years, we're a $100+ million company. So any questions so far? No? Lauren's sitting here as my niece being like, wow, I didn't know all that, right? Is that what you're thinking? hmm He was older. I needed a driver. I had 5 routes. Yes. So I would say um, the takeaway that I think that you guys should consider today is, first of all, that it's so critical that if you decide to go down the road of entrepreneurship, or whether you just work for someone, your opportunity is centered on the value that you create. If you don't create value, you'll probably be fired or you'll go out of business. If you do create value, how much value are you creating? And I promise you, in my own business, the people who create the most value get paid the most money. And people can start, entry level in my business around, $50,000. But if they create a ton of value, there's a huge upside fast because we understand that principle that dollars follow value, not just for the business, but for the people who contribute to the business. We know that people are assets and things are not. So the way that we treat our employees is, I believe, significantly better than most places. I think our culture is on par with probably one of the best cultures in kind of the Utah tech space. And we encourage our team to send it. I know this is like teenage terminology, but like full send it. My kids say stuff like that all the time, and that's what my team does all the time. And it's great to see how much learning and growth is happening because of that. Yeah.
So I've got a question. You shared that experience of building your sales company and then losing it, 2007 and 8 and 9. How are you different today? How are you doing things differently? How has it changed you now that you find yourself as a CEO of another successful company? Like,
Well, there's a couple things. A couple I mentioned was I hate debt, and I hate I not hate, but I try and avoid giving up equity in my business just in exchange for money. Just because if I can do it without the investor, then it gives me so much more flexibility. So in the business sense, that's one thing I've learned. I also was significantly humbled enough, so now I don't think I'm as cool as I used to, which is really helpful to not make bad decisions. So, and my wife is really good at keeping me grounded and reminding me of all the failures I've had in my life, just so that I can, make sure that I don't make those same mistakes. But I think part of it also is I learned the value of the right people on the bus, and to use a term from Jim Collins, if you haven't read those books, they're great. But having the right people on the bus puts me in a position where I'm not just freewheeling on decisions. I'm properly evaluating the best ways that we can move the business forward. We're big believers in pivoting and changing the direction as the marketplace or otherwise dictates. For instance, I was telling Matt in the car on the way up here, in July of last year, the USPS announced that they're getting rid of the reseller program, which obviously affects us in a significant way. And they were going to replace it with what's called a CEC program. It's basically, they used to have 3 resellers, and everybody who's in the space would just work with the resellers. And the USPS said, we're going to get rid of that, and we're going to put contracts directly with technology platforms. Well, I didn't know back in 2016 when we decided to do a tech company that I would have been out of business if I hadn't started building tech in 2018, because now we were capable of acquiring one of those contracts. The problem was this contract was not as good as the reseller contract. And on top of that, if anyone has paid attention to the economy, especially in e-commerce, there's been a significant decline in e-commerce volume, which affects my business. COVID, when COVID hit, my business doubled overnight because everyone was buying everything online, and it's kind of leveled off and then actually declined as the economy's declined. And we had to make some changes. We implemented some new products. I mean, I won't go into the details because I don't think we have enough time. But we implemented some new products. We adjusted things. We got the contracts in place. And as all of our competitors and carriers were seeing 20% decline in revenue from one year to the next, we're forecasted to probably be at a 40% year over year growth. And it's just because we have the right team, we made the necessary adjustments, and we committed to those adjustments, and we're in a good place because of it. So, any other questions?
I do, but I don't know if anyone else does.
Does anyone else have any questions? Is anyone else wondering if I have another $100 bill? I don't. I only brought one, so sorry about that.
Can you describe simply what your business does that creates value?
So it all started with evaluating. We'll take data from a customer, their shipping data. We'll run it through like an A/B comparison on their carrier mix and how they've selected the service levels, and we'll run it through our carrier mix and service levels, and we'll show them in that process how much money they would save, in an annualized basis. And usually we'll see anywhere from, $20,000 a year to several $1 million a year in savings. And then the technology side, we knew that there was barriers. The e-commerce industry is very fragmented. You have a shopping cart system, you have an order management system, you have a warehouse management system, you have all these different things, and some of them are good at certain aspects and some of them aren't. But the TMS, which is transportation management system, is what we use or built in order to help facilitate, automate that selection process. So you can show them in an A/B comparison how to do it, but executing that with whatever technology stack they have is not necessarily easy. And so we built technology to help make that a lot easier.
Cool.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
If you have a business idea but you don't think it has value,
Well, then it probably is a hobby, right? So there's nothing wrong with hobbies, but the only way you're going to find out is if that business idea has value is to probably do some research, either competitive research or asking people if they think it has value. And you can't ask your mom because your mom's always going to encourage you. Tell you how good you are and the best and all these things, and that you're so good at singing that you should go on American Idol. But then that's the funny thing is you see all these people on American Idol and you're like, I can't believe they're on American Idol because their mom told them they're good at singing, right? But that's what makes it entertaining. So you can't ask your mom, that's the point. Any other questions? How many people want to be entrepreneurs? How many people have ideas of what they want to do? Okay. That's exciting. Yeah.
So you talked about that grit or that push that you have. Is that something that has been kind of innate for you since you were a kid, or is that something?
I think for me, I think there's an aspect to it that can be innate for sure, but I think that there's also social pressures or other things that can hold that back in people, or just the idea of being uncomfortable is a little bit scary, right? And so I'm trying to teach my kids as they grow up, when they talk to that person across the counter, that it's not that bad. It's not that scary. Just do it, right? And as they do it, those little things become easier and easier. So I think that to answer your question, I think that we all have different personalities, and those personalities make it either easier or more difficult to do that. But it doesn't mean you can't do that, right? It doesn't mean you can't push yourself out of your comfort zone into a space that is challenging, but you're gonna learn and you're gonna grow, and you might not make it work that first time, but maybe the third or fourth time it really does work and it's awesome, right? And so I think the answer is it's a choice that you have to make. In fact, let me just tell you this, a little side story. There's this guy in my office. It's not that weird, but it might sound weird as I'm telling the story. But I have had, in my life, back and neck issues consistently, not too bad, but, consistently for, since high school. I would either throw my neck out or back out at least a couple times a year. And I decided as I am getting older that I need to become a lot more flexible if I want to do what I want to do long term. So there's this little shop in my town, Harriman, that I live in, and they came out as a company called Stretch Lab. And I was like, Stretch Lab, that's just ironic that I'm thinking about being more flexible. And now I was like, what is that? And so I went into the business one day, again, uncomfortable, right? I didn't know anything about them, but I was like, I'm going to figure it out. And so I went in there, I was like, can you guys tell me what you do? And they explained it all. And they have all these tables, and I've done massage therapy, I've done chiropractics, and nothing sticks, right? And so they started, I started working with this guy, his name is John Rogers. I started working with him for about, I don't know, a little over a year. And it was like life changing. I don't have issues anymore. It's kind of like physical therapy, but it's stretch therapy per se. And one day, John was talking to me about how terrible his job was. He hated it. He hated what he got paid. He loved helping people, but he hated the business and working for that particular business, whether it was a manager or whatever else. And he was just complaining. And I said to him, I was like, John, slow down. I said, you can't complain about something you choose. If you want to do something else, or if this isn't working for you, choose something else. And so I didn't realize at the time what kind of impact that had on him. But about, I don't know, a month later, he came to me and said, hey, I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to do this myself. And at the time, he was making between probably $40,000 and $50,000 a year. He started his own company. It's called Stretch Therapy. And he started going to people's houses and bootstrapped the whole thing, didn't borrow any money from anyone. And in his first year, which was last year, 2022, he made just over 100 grand. And this guy's like 25 years old. He's a couple years out of college, and his mind was blown. Like 100 grand was like, I don't know if that's possible. Now, 2023, he has a waiting list. He just hired his first employee. And so now he's going through all the growing pains of having that experience. We still spend a lot of time together, so we have this mentoring experience on a regular basis, and he's asking me as he goes through all these challenges. But he'll probably do close to $200,000 this year, and then as he brings on employees, he'll make some of the money off of what they're doing, right? And so his opportunity to grow is enhanced. He feels like he can create a new category. So like chiropractic or massage therapy or physical therapy, he's like a pioneer of this new category where he's combining stretch and physical therapy to solve people's problems long term. I've talked to him about building an educational institute where people can come and get licensed to do this. Like, so all of a sudden, what he was complaining about, he chose to do something uncomfortable because he knew that he needed to be responsible for that choice, right? And so that's just one example. There's one other really small example. There's this girl that came, started working in our office, and she was like a HR assistant. And she comes into my office one day and she says, hey, can I meet with you once a week for an hour? And I just want to learn. And I was like, because you were willing to do that, yes, you can. She started coming to my office once a week. She's elevated herself significantly. She now is a brand manager in the marketing department, and it's because she chose to do something that was uncomfortable. I promise you, the majority of the people in my company should not be afraid to do this, but they are naturally, because society has said that somehow I'm better than you because I'm the CEO and you're not, right? That's not true at all. I can learn from her, she can learn from me, we can all learn together, but it only happens fast if we choose to be uncomfortable. So, okay. Well, I appreciate your time. I like telling my story. Be humble. Remember that dollars follow value. People are assets, things are not. And just go out there and be a legend. So.
Thanks,